Okay, fine. If you're looking for somebody to blame for the Memphis Grizzlies barely getting past the Portland Trail Blazers, who are playing a majority G League team, you can blame me. People have been blaming me for the issues with the Memphis Grizzlies for about a decade now. So go for it. Bring it on. Joe didn't do a preview. DeMichael didn't do a preview. That's why Portland hung around. It was still a double-digit win. Relax. We're going to talk about that and the Pelicans tonight on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another installment of Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Joe Mullinax, flying solo this time around. DeMichael is currently traveling to New Orleans, bless his heart. So no DeMichael for this episode, but you will see him and I together the rest of the week, Thursday and Friday. DeMichael and I will be bringing you some Grizzlies content here on Locked On Grizzlies, but it's just me talking to you on this Wednesday edition of the program. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA and get on your way to being your best self. Again, we are proud members here at Locked On Grizzlies of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out over on YouTube. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, all those fun things. Bookmark us. Make us a part of your NBA playoff experience. The time is near. The Grizzlies are in the postseason. What seed they will be still remains to be seen, but Memphis will be in the playoffs, and game 1 and 2 will be in Memphis, regardless of who the opponent is. So DeMichael Cole will be there for the commercial appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, as the Grizzlies beat writer. I will be following along as the Grizzlies columnist over at Bluff City Media. So lots of fun things to focus in on. Oh, and by the way, speaking of Bluff City Media, use the promo code Mullinax if you go to bluffcitymedia.co/join. 10% off an annual subscription plus a 10-day free trial, heading into the playoffs. Check out all the amazing work the GBB, Grizzly Bear Blues, is doing as part of Bluff City Media now. Again, first 10 days are free. Then it becomes essentially $5 a month for a whole year. But amazing content, not just on the Grizzlies, but the Memphis Tigers and others. Really just a great place to work and cover and read and get podcasts. bluffcitymedia.co/join. Use the promo code Mullinax. 10% off an annual subscription. Do it right now. What are you waiting for? What are the Grizzlies waiting for is probably what you said throughout the Grizzlies-Blazers game. It wasn't until the fourth quarter where the first quarter, pardon me. Let me rewind a little bit. The Grizzlies scored 41 points on the Portland Trail Blazers in the first quarter, and it looked like it was going to be a bloodletting, right? It looked like that the Grizzlies were going to run Portland off the court, and it was going to be an early night. I could even start recording Locked On Grizzlies a little bit sooner, right? Get a little more sleep, right? No, that's actually not what happened at all. In the second quarter, Portland scores 37 points, Memphis only 25, and it's a fight for much of the rest of the contest, at least until late in the fourth quarter, where the Trailblazers, for whatever reason, for those of you listening to the podcast, if you're not on YouTube, I just did air quotes because the reason is tanking. For whatever reason, the Trailblazers cooled off, only scored 14 points in the final frame. Memphis scored 23 and did enough to have a 10-point victory. So a double-digit win for the Grizzlies, but it was a closer game than that if you actually watch the contest. My first big takeaway was Ja Morant. I wrote about Ja Morant over at Bluff City Media. Obviously, DeMichael did for the commercial appeal as well. And I wrote about how it was, inspired by what DeMichael wrote at the commercial appeal, talking about how this is a team that is trying to reintegrate Ja Morant as the number one option. Like, no more of this talk, he's not the number one option, or he's trying to find his way. He's not, Desmond Bane is doing so well and Jaren Jackson Jr. is doing so well. Ironically, in this particular contest, Desmond Bane was the leading scorer, scored 30 points on 22 shots, had a really impressive showing, 30 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. But Ja Morant is still the most important option for this Memphis Grizzlies team. And he showed flashes of that again in this game, especially early on, especially when the team needed him to kind of right the ship. He was there. 9 assists, only 2 turnovers. That's improvement. We've talked about how his turnovers are too high, trying to get that number down. He did that against Portland. 23 points on 15 shots, very efficient, made a couple of threes. It was good to see Ja throw down a poster dunk, show off some confidence. As DeMichael has written about, as I've written about, Ja Morant is the straw that stirs this drink. So allowing for him to be in that position to cultivate and create a climate where he can both be the audacious player that he was on the floor while continuing his growth and development off of it. That is something that continues to be a priority, not just for Ja, but for the Grizzlies at large, because they need him. I mentioned Desmond Bane, 30 points on 22 shots. Doesn't get much better than that. He took 12 threes, made 5 of them. Absolutely. Yes. Sign me up, right? That's a really good night for him. 7 rebounds, 5 assists, as I mentioned a moment ago. He was that lead option in this particular contest. Doesn't mean it was the right thing. You'd like for Ja to be a little more aggressive. But Bane found his shot. They weren't able to defend him consistently. He was able to get to the rim. He was able to find space, again, making some threes, some big-time shots. And he did it late. He was the clutch guy in this game. When Memphis needed a dagger, Bane was the one that was willing to drill it right between the eyes of the Trailblazers. He has that capacity as a 3-level scorer. Ja, obviously a better getter to the rimmer, or a better at getting to the rim, as I butcher the English language. Far better at getting to the rim than Bane. Finishing, they're actually kind of comparable. In the mid-range, from beyond the arc, that is still Dez's strong suit, but he has enhanced his game enough as a creator off the dribble where opposing teams have to respect him, or he's going to be able to get his as he gets to the basket. And he shot 7 of 10 from his 2-point buckets in this particular contest. 7 of his 10 misses came from beyond the arc. So an extremely effective night on the perimeter. And then the third Grizzlies guard in this game, because they went with a starting lineup that was 3 guards instead of 2 guards and a forward. Dillon Brooks did not play in this game. Luke Kennard continues to be red hot for this Grizzlies team. And it's so important. I tweeted out that, Luke Kennard being here is penance for what Chandler Parsons did to the Memphis Grizzlies years ago. On a selfish note, what Chandler Parsons did to me. Unless any of you wrote an article saying that Chandler Parsons and the Memphis Grizzlies were a match made in heaven, I feel like I can own the excitement that Kennard is actually the 3-point threat that a lot of folks, myself included, thought that Chandler Parsons was going to be. Luke Kennard, obviously a very different player from Parsons, even when Parsons was good. But 6 for 11, 6 of 10 from 3. Luke only took 1 2-point shot the entire contest. So he's not Desmond Bane, right? He's not a guy that's going to attack the basket, get to the rim, make that a priority. But he is capable. And this is something that I have talked about, DeMichael has talked about, others have talked about. This idea that all he is a shooter. 2 assists in this game for Luke Kennard, but that's a bit deceptive. If you watch the game again, he was able to create. There were some hockey assist moments, moving with the ball. The ability to handle is underrated with him. That's not to say that he's Bane or Ja. He's not going to, take Tyus Jones's spot completely in this rotation moving forward as a backup point guard. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that he has the physical capacity to do it. And because of that offensive versatility, it makes him more dangerous given his elite skill set as a 3-point shooter. So the 3 guards, Ja, Bane, and Kennard, the 3 amigos, so to speak, were the major pieces that paced Memphis in this contest. 30 points for Bane, 23 for Ja, 20 for Kennard. So do the math. That is 73 points across those 3 guys. As much as Portland had success, and they did have success, shout out to Skylar Mays in particular, coming out from the G League, really doing some impressive things, scoring the ball in this one, 24 points on 16 shots. Shaedon Sharpe showed some flashes of why people are excited about him and the Trailblazers moving forward from this year, had some really impressive plays and displays of athleticism. They couldn't stay in front of the Grizzlies guards, and that was one of the major focuses of this game. When Memphis was able to build a lead and when Memphis was able to put it away late, it was those 3 Grizzly guards in particular that got the job done. So that is promising going into a postseason where you hope to have Steven Adams. You're certainly not going to have Brandon Clark. Obviously, Dillon Brooks will be in that mix. But if you need a bucket, if you need to score in bunches, that 3-guard lineup of Ja, Bane, and Kennard. Defensively, probably some room for improvement, but offensively, that's going to be about as efficient as it gets for what the Grizzlies can throw out there on the perimeter. We talked about the backcourt against the Portland Trailblazers here just a moment ago. Now we're going to look at the front court, some things that happened with the bigs and forwards against the Portland Trailblazers next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by eBay Motors. Big fan of eBay Motors. Make sure you are checking them out. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. For parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will be discussing the importance of the Grizzlies bigs in a closer than probably should have been victory over the Portland Trailblazers. This is Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Joe Mullinax, again flying solo on this episode. DeMichael Cole, depending on when you're listening and watching this, he is either en route or already in New Orleans for the Grizzlies game against the Pelicans on Wednesday night. And we'll talk about that contest and, who could sit, who could play. Maybe everybody plays since Memphis still only 2 games up on Sacramento for the 2 seed with 3 games to go. It's going to be difficult for the Kings to catch Memphis, but it's certainly still mathematically possible. It's within the realm of potential outcome. So how the Grizzlies handle that will be interesting to watch unfold. And obviously we'll all be watching the injury report and all those things, but we'll talk more about that later on in the show. I want to talk about what I saw from the Grizzlies front court. We talked about the 3-guard lineup, Morant, Bane, and Kennard, how successful they were offensively. Make no mistake about it. The best two-way player on this team is Jaren Jackson Jr. He is that impactful. When he is on the floor, he creates massive problems for the opponent, and it shows in his plus 28 plus-minus rating for the game against Portland. When Jaren Jackson Jr. was on the floor, the Memphis Grizzlies outscored the Portland Trailblazers by 28 points. That is not an accident. That's not an accident. Sometimes that number, or I'll be honest, a lot of times that number can be very deceptive. But again, when that number aligns with your eyes, it becomes further evidence of what you're trying to explain. And if you watched that game, as I did, Jaren Jackson Jr. was an issue. He was aggressive getting to the rim, 7 of 9 from the charity stripe. Ja Morant only took 4 free throws against the Portland Trailblazers. Jaren took 9, and he made 7 of them. That's important. 7 rebounds, strong showing from him there. 17 points, the defensive impact, even though he only had 1 block. Teams are petrified. Teams are petrified of this man. They are terrified of what Jaren Jackson Jr. is capable of protecting the rim. It's like a cornerback in football when you know he's a lockdown, shutdown, like Sauce Gardner of the New York Jets right now. Don't even bother throwing to that side of the field when that dude is out there. Jaren is having a similar impact. The Portland Trailblazers chucked a ton of threes, 42 threes. Obviously, Memphis shot almost 50 in their own right. But Portland was not super excited to have to deal with the paint monster that is Jaren Jackson Jr. And even though he only had the 1 block, no steals, so those stocks numbers that we talk about, not nearly as impressive as maybe they have been in the past, but his presence is so damning in the best way possible. You just assume that your shot is going to, at the very least, get altered. Very likelihood going to get blocked. And that makes Jaren, in my opinion, the defensive player of the year, in the opinion of a lot of other people. I believe he's still the betting favorite in Las Vegas, but that obviously can change. We'll see what FanDuel says about it later on in the week as we get closer to the end of the regular season. Jaren was extremely impressive. I liked what he did offensively through an alley-oop pass to Santi Aldama off of a Luke Kennard hustle play, getting the ball back, one of those 50-50 balls that you hear coaches talk about all the time. Kennard tips it to Jaren Jackson Jr. Jaren with a wonderful lob pass to Santi for an alley-oop. It's cool to dunk. Like it was fun to watch, but again, the fact that Jaren is passing, as I talked about on Monday's episode of Locked On Grizzlies, I want to see more of that, or excuse me, Tuesday's episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I want to see more of Jaren, the facilitator. Again, he doesn't need to be Tyus Jones or Ja Morant. He's not a point guard. I don't want him to be a point forward. I just don't want him to be so predictable that opposing teams can game plan and say Jackson is 95% likely to not pass when he touches the ball down low or when he gets ahead of steam to the basket. I'm all about offensive versatility because as a defensive player, as a defensive coach, when you have an opposing team that can do a lot of different things, it spreads you out even more thin than you want to be. So Jaren being less predictable, that's what I want to see. And he did that. Maybe Jaren's a big fan of Locked On Grizzlies. Who knows? I know he's a big fan of Joe Mullinax because who's not a big fan of Joe Mullinax, right? I mean, at this point, it's kind of foolish not to be a big fan, right? Right? No? Okay, that's fine. Jaren was really strong. X didn't play a ton. He was struggling early on in the game. He was 0 for 4 from the field, not necessarily having the defensive impact, especially in that second quarter. You don't want to scapegoat people. I don't think that's fair. Again, the Kennard, Bane, Morant, you saw issues with Conchar and Tyus Jones at times. You don't want to scapegoat, right? And Taylor Jenkins obviously was, kind of coded, not as direct maybe, as he usually isn't in his comments after the game. X only played 13 minutes. He didn't play the entire third quarter. Why that was, something to keep an eye on going into New Orleans. Maybe he had a nagging injury and they wanted him to rest a little bit, but he was not helping the defensive issues. It was not his strongest performance, to say the least. Only 13 minutes played. He was a -5 in those 13 minutes. But, somebody that came in and kind of filled that void, at least on the glass, was Santi Aldama. Aldama with another double-digit rebound showing, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, a solid outing, the only reserve player with a positive rating. So the 4 starters that weren't Xavier Tillman had positive net ratings. And then you had Santi Aldama, who obviously logged a lot of minutes with those guys. He was a +8 himself. For whatever reason, the reserves didn't have it in this game, and that's lightly concerning because obviously back-to-back, we'll talk more about the Pelicans later on in the show, you would imagine that even if everybody plays, and Dylan Brooks hopefully will be back for this contest, even if everybody plays, they're not going to get the full allotment of minutes. Ja Morant played 35 against Portland. Bane played 36. Kennard played 34. I don't know that Memphis is as worried about Luke because his role with the Grizzlies is so much larger than it was with the Clippers by the time he was traded. I doubt they're on similar planes in terms of minutes concerns. But when you look at what Santi was able to do and you see how he's rebounding, you see how he had 4 assists. Again, I like when my bigs are capable of doing it. They don't have to be the main focus of their game. They don't have to be Draymond Green, Marc Gasol, Joakim Noah, take your pick of passing big men. Obviously, Domantas Sabonis would be a good example in the modern game. Jokic, of course, as well. Nikola Jokic in Denver. Don't have to be those guys. All they need to be able to do is find a way to be productive in the time that they're out there, especially on the glass, if Steven Adams isn't out there. Now, Steven Adams is entering a reevaluation window, whatever the heck that means. If you've been following this Grizzlies team long enough, you know that description can be frustrating. Maybe we can get more from DeMichael Cole in the episodes to close out the week about what that process will look like, MRI results, all those sorts of things. But in terms of Santi Aldama, a really bad defender. I think that's a fair thing to say. Luke Kennard has kind of put it together here in the last few games. He's not ever going to be considered a great defender, but I don't see the same misfires, the same over rotations, the same missed assignments that I saw with Luke a few weeks ago when he first got to Memphis, or a month or so ago when he became a more firmly entrenched piece of the rotation. Santi Aldama is just not good. And that doesn't mean that he can't get better. I think he can get better as a young player. You would expect him to improve somewhat in that area, but he is probably the team's worst defensive player at this stage. And when you are dealing with that, you have to produce in other ways. And to Santi's credit, acknowledging he's not the best defensive player, a +8. He scored the basketball. He shot well. He created for others. He rebounded extremely well. And that is vital for this Grizzlies team, whether Steven Adams is out there or not. Xavier Tillman, Santi Aldama, David Roddy, who's going to be in that rotation mix when the playoffs start, assuming Steven Adams is healthy. That's just a big assumption at this stage. That is going to be an interesting question going into next week through the play-in tournament. That'll be one of the things I'm sure DeMichael and I talk about. As whoever the Grizzlies are playing gets decided, they get a couple of days off. How are they going to work and sort out this rotation stuff? That's going to bear watching. So Jaren Jackson Jr. was dominant. I was impressed by Santi Aldama, Xavier Tillman. Not his night. Hopefully things get better for him. And the good news about the NBA is, good or bad, the game moves on, right? Memphis has a game tonight in New Orleans, second half of back-to-back, their final back-to-back of the NBA's 2022-2023 season, because obviously in the playoffs, there are no back-to-backs. So how will Memphis attack the Pelicans? How did the Kings cook New Orleans on Tuesday night themselves? It'll be an interesting game. How Memphis handles it, we'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel is very excited, as am I, about the NBA playoffs being right around the corner. It's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores, three-pointers drained, all sorts of different things that you can even combine at times for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. Don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Grizzlies Pelicans tonight. What will that look like? Coming up next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Joe Mullinax, Grizzlies columnist for Bluff City Media. Again, bluffcitymedia.co/join. Use the promo code Mullinax to get 10% off an annual subscription right now. Plus, it comes with a 10-day free trial to see all the great content that we're putting out over at Bluff City Media. So that's bluffcitymedia.co/join. Mullinax is your promo code. DeMichael Cole will be back with me for the rest of the week, talking about the result of the upcoming Grizzlies-Pelicans game, and obviously looking ahead to a little more settled weekend, just 2 more games, both on the road. Memphis is done with their home slate. They finished up a historic home campaign. Big ups to the Grizzlies. They picked up their 50th win, which is obviously significant, so shout out to them for that. On the regular season, a 50-win season is nothing to shake a stick at. That's still impressive in the NBA. And they're at New Orleans, at Milwaukee, at Oklahoma City to close out the season. Milwaukee might be resting on Friday night. We'll see how the seeding stuff is playing out in the Eastern Conference. I'm sure that's something DeMichael and I will talk about for the Friday show. But Memphis is done with their home schedule. It's all finished, all kaput. And again, a really impressive season at home for the Memphis Grizzlies. They picked up just a remarkable amount of wins and success in their games at home. I can't speak enough to how impressive they have been in that role. 35 wins, 35-6. That's the best in the NBA this year. That home court advantage matters. And it matters beyond this particular game, right? The Portland Trailblazers game. It matters going into the playoffs because it enables them to, if they're the 2 seed, have home court advantage for 2 series instead of just 1, assuming that the 3 seed, the Sacramento Kings, for all intents and purposes, are not eliminated in the first round, which, given the parity of the Western Conference, the way that it could be the Golden State Warriors, Los Angeles Lakers with a healthy LeBron and Anthony Davis, maybe those things happen. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is the 2 seed is very important, at least to me, right? I don't know how much it matters to the Memphis Grizzlies. Maybe they don't see it as vital as I do. I hope that they agree with me, which they don't always, of course, and they decide to play these guys, at least to start, and try to get this win on the road against the Pelicans. Not just because of the 2 seed, although I think that's pretty important, but because they've been pretty bad on the road, right? Like, let's not have illusions of grandeur here. They have been a bad road team this season. Maybe not as bad as Golden State or somebody like that, but it's their really strong 35-6 home record that has enabled them to be a 50-win team. That has enabled them to hold the spot of top playoff contender in the Western Conference. They're 15-23 on the road, and they need to get some confidence built up against a team that is good at home. The New Orleans Pelicans are 25-14 at home entering this contest. Now, the Pelicans lost at home last night to the Sacramento Kings, that very team that is chasing the Grizzlies for the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. How did that happen? Well, it helps when you have players for the Kings like Keegan Murray that go 7 of 10 from 3. That's extremely valuable. Between him and Malik Monk coming off the bench, you saw a lot of impressive scoring. Sacramento was very balanced in their scoring. All 5 starters scored in double digits. Kevin Huerter only had 11. De'Aaron Fox had 23. Sabonis and Barnes both had 16. So it was a balanced scoring effort. And then again, Malik Monk, that 6th man of the year candidate, really strong showing. Davion Mitchell, 8 points himself. Compare that to what New Orleans did. The Pelicans were not able to keep up with the bench production of the Kings. Even the starters weren't able to score as much. They had Herb Jones, who only had 11 points, an off night for CJ McCollum, 6 for 19. Brandon Ingram was roughly what you would expect from Brandon Ingram, but it wasn't enough. And because of that, the Pelicans will be looking for a win, and we have to keep in mind that the Pelicans are in the midst of their own chases and races in the Western Conference. Obviously, a little bit different from what the Grizzlies are doing. Memphis is 2 games up on Sacramento, like I said, with 3 games to go, pushing for that number 2 seed. The Pelicans could, in theory, miss the play-in. Now, a lot would have to go wrong. Okay, they'd have to lose out. Dallas would have to win out. It looks like Utah and the Lakers, that's a competitive game as we record this. So the standings change literally day to day with the way that things are going in the Western Conference. The East is set, right? Everybody's eliminated in the East. The play-in seeds might change here and there. The top seeds might change. But the 10 teams that are in the postseason, including the play-in tournament, are set. That is not the case in the Western Conference. You still have numerous teams beyond the play-in alive in Utah and the Dallas Mavericks. So the Pelicans could theoretically fall out. It's unlikely, but they could. And they need as many wins as they can. They don't want to fall to the 9 or the 10 seed. That makes life more difficult to try to get into the playoffs. And they're going to be motivated to try to compete. They may not have Zion Williamson, and that's obviously going to be a challenge for them. But Brandon Ingram can score with the best of them. Herb Jones is a very tough defender, one of the best in the NBA. Grizzlies fans are familiar with Jonas Valanciunas and what he's capable of as a rebounder and a scorer. And obviously, there's not going to be a Steven Adams out there to battle Jonas in this contest. So is Xavier Tillman going to be able to get his feet back under him? You don't want Jaren to take on that matchup because it could negate some of the things that he does defensively. And the question of who plays, right? The last time there was a back-to-back, Ja Morant didn't play. I think they said it was quad soreness. Obviously, they've given other guys days off recently because of that. So it'll be a window into how seriously the Grizzlies are taking this race for the 2 seed. Again, it's going to be tough for Sacramento to catch Memphis. They're down 2 games with 3 to go. It's unlikely that the Grizzlies completely sit guys out unless the 2 seed is clinched against the Bucks and against the Thunder, because they need at least one of those games if they lose to the Pelicans in New Orleans on Wednesday. If the team is fresh, they haven't had a back-to-back in a couple of days, if they have the ability to get down there and play these guys and hopefully, maybe negate some of the minutes they play, maybe nobody plays more than 25 minutes, whatever the case might be, I'm hopeful they play because there is opportunity here. The Pelicans don't have a strong bench in terms of scoring beyond somebody like a Dyson Daniels, who has really been impressive as a defender in his own right. But, Larry Nance Jr. is hit or miss. Josh Richardson, who they acquired from the Spurs around the trade deadline, hit or miss. The Grizzlies have a chance to, again, against a good home team that is going to almost certainly be in the play-in, go pick up a road win. They need to build up that confidence. If they're trying to play their best basketball this time of the year, sitting these guys out with an opportunity like this when Sacramento the night before, the team that's chasing you, was able to go into that building and win by double digits, that should be a motivating factor, a driving force. So I'm curious to see how the Grizzlies handle this. I think that they, for all intents and purposes, have proven that they're going to do what they think is best, regardless of what you and I and others perhaps think is best when it comes to minutes and how that's all limited. I would hope that they value the idea of competing against a good team on the road and trying to navigate the challenges of beating such a team in that situation. If you're trying to play your best basketball this time of year, obviously you want to improve your play. And these last 3 games here are a possible chance to get into a rhythm going into potential game 3, game 4 in the next week or so of a first round playoff series. So no inside information. Would it surprise me if guys sat? No. Would I be disappointed? Yes, because I think that this is a chance for them to get their feet under them on the road and pick up a good win against a team that needs the win. Portland didn't need the win. They proved that in their fourth quarter performance. The Pelicans need this. So if Memphis can go in there, pick up a big victory in New Orleans, I think that's a big confidence booster heading in. And again, that almost certainly cinches the 2 seed, right? Two games at least up with 2 to go. Pretty positive development if it comes to that. So fingers crossed that the Grizzlies agree with me. But like I said earlier, that's not always the case. Thank you so much for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now make your second listen Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. The next time we're together, it will be Thursday here on Locked On Grizzlies. DeMichael Cole and I will be back together. It'll feel so good to have DeMichael talking Grizzlies Pelicans with me, looking ahead to the Bucks game on Friday a little bit, talking Steven Adams updates, perhaps, all those fun things. Make sure you're checking in with us for the Thursday episode, just like you checked in with us for this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Check us out on YouTube, like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure you're downloading all the sorts of things that you do wherever you get your podcast. Continue to make Locked On Grizzlies part of your Grizzlies experience and spread the word about Locked On Grizzlies. We put out some good content here on Locked On Grizzlies each and every day, and that will continue as the playoffs roll ahead. Make DeMichael and I part of your preparations for the NBA postseason. Until next time, I'm Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in, Grizzlies fans. See you tomorrow. This is Locked On Grizzlies.